Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. Purdue split the past week with a comeback win over Minnesota before ending its 9-game win streak with a loss at Ohio State. How concerned should Purdue fans be after this? We'll jump into some takeaways and thoughts from the past week here on the show today and look a little bit just at Purdue's recent play and see if things are trending as poorly as some of the conversation out there seems to indicate. We'll also answer some of your questions. Thanks to those of you who sent those in. Always appreciate that. Before looking ahead to the next week here as Purdue closes out the month of February with 2 more Big Ten games. If you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter at Boilers Beyond. Lots going on there, that's for sure. You'll want to follow. Come join the conversation. You can always send in questions there or over email, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. And be sure to subscribe wherever you miss your podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. But this past week, Purdue 84, Minnesota 76, a game where Minnesota led by 8 at half, got up to a 10-point lead in the second half. Purdue pulls away late, though, goes on a run, really nice second half effort to come back and win. Then Sunday, Ohio State 73, Purdue 69. Purdue gets off to a great start in the first 5 minutes. And then from there, it was mostly Ohio State. Purdue did not play well at all. Ohio State did play well. Purdue didn't quit, but it was too little too late. And Purdue slips up for the third time of the season, falling to 23-3. What is that now? 11-3 in Big Ten, 12-3 in Big Ten play. That would be 12-3 in Big Ten play. So, overall, this was not a very good week for Purdue. This was not an encouraging week because some of the things you saw pop up were not things that you really want to see from one of the nation's best teams. It's just not. Let's start with something a little unique, though, because these were 2 games in a row where Zach Edey had to deal with some foul trouble. This is something Purdue has not dealt with a whole lot this season. Zach Edey is well documented and certainly well argued, but let's face it, Zach Edey is not in foul trouble a lot. And, contrary to the popular Twitter belief that it's only Big Ten games where that's the case, No, Zach Edey stays out of foul trouble really well. But in these 2 games, he didn't. In Minnesota, it hit quicker. Within the first 10 minutes of the game, I think, he was on the bench with 2 fouls. Caleb First gave Purdue some really good minutes there. But Purdue does not have the same rim protection without Zach Edey in the game. Minnesota got hot from the field and flipped that thing. And the same thing with Ohio State. Purdue led 28-25 when Edey picked up his second foul. And at that point, you felt all right about where Purdue was, even though Purdue wasn't playing tremendously well. But Ohio State finishes that half on a 10-2 run to take a 5-point lead into the break. That's significant. That's very significant. And look, it was interesting. You can see some of the player interviews after the games. And Trey Kaufman-Renn talks about some of the challenges of not having Edey out there because of how much of the team runs through him. But Purdue's just got to be better. Purdue's just got to be better because when you look at this, when he's on the floor, Edey's a +9 against Minnesota, and then Edey's a +10 against Ohio State. That's a game where, Purdue loses the game by 4, but it's a +10 when Zach Edey's out there. That's a huge difference. That's a really big difference. And plus-minus is not always the greatest stat in the world, but it does tell you some stuff. And I think it's pretty obvious with Zach Edey how much better Purdue is with him on the floor. That, it's not like these fouls were out of the ordinary. A shooting foul, a couple of shooting fouls. He has the one where, he just gets into a guy in transition trying to set a post up. It's nothing crazy, but Purdue's struggling too much, even though it's natural to struggle a little bit without the best player in college basketball on the floor. The big story, and really from everything, is Purdue turning the ball over too much. And it's not the most glamorous topic to talk about. It's not the most complex thing in the world. Purdue just turns the ball over too much. And that's been the case when Purdue has lost games this year and in games where it's struggled. Like you look back at Rutgers and Purdue turned the ball over too much. You look back at Northwestern even. There was a stretch in that game where Purdue had some turnovers and Northwestern went on a run. You saw that here again. In the first half against Minnesota, Purdue turned it over 7 times, and Minnesota had an 8-point lead at half. Now, Purdue cleaned it up, finished the game with just 10, but the turnovers can't be ignored. That's the biggest problem here. And against Ohio State, it was a 5-alarm fire. 14 turnovers for Purdue, leading to 22 Ohio State points. That's over 1.5 points for the other team every time you turn the ball over. Ohio State as a whole averaged 1.2 points per possession. So that spikes pretty significantly when Purdue turns the ball over and hands it to them. And if you take those away, that's a pretty big gap. That's a really big gap. Ohio State did some good things with its game plan. It forced Purdue off the 3-point line, and we'll talk about that more momentarily. Zed Key was really effective at getting some strips against Zach Edey. I had this thought after the game that those two have played against each other quite a bit. Zed Key's been around Ohio State for a while now. Zach Edey's in his 4th year at Purdue. The two teams played 3 times last year. I think they only played once the year before when Jaden Ivey hit that game winner. But, these teams and players are familiar with each other now. In modern college basketball, that's not always the case. But I do wonder, maybe there was something to that. That Zed Keys just played enough against Zach Edey that, he was able to make some plays and seen him enough. Although I guess he got hurt last year, but I don't know. We're thinking out loud here. Maybe I'm going nowhere, but Edey has 6 turnovers. He has 4 against Minnesota. It's just too many. It's too many. You're going to have some in the post, but that number's too high. The same deal with Braden Smith. You're going to have some there, but the number's too high. Against Minnesota, Smith had, I don't know if I can get anything to load here. Against Minnesota, Smith just had 2 turnovers. He has 3 of them against Ohio State. So nothing crazy, but just the combination of all of these turnovers Purdue has makes it really difficult to overcome. I thought it was notable that Ohio State did take that approach of trying to run Purdue off the 3-point line, because Purdue's a very good 3-point shooting team. It's one of the best in the nation. And it's interesting, after last season, when Purdue did struggle from the 3-point line, that hasn't been a problem at all this year for Purdue. Purdue's still shooting around 40% from 3 on the year. It's been fine. But, yeah, over 40% even on the year. But Ohio State only lets Purdue get 9 off. And in this game, Braden Smith is a great mid-range jump shooter. He knocks a few down, but he misses a few. Fletcher Lawyer got some good looks on some runners and floaters. They didn't fall. He's in a bit of a cold stretch here. It's clear 3 games in a row now where he hasn't shot the ball well. The vitriol towards him is a bit out of control, but it is what it is. It's part of it. Someone's going to get the flack. It's him right now. But keep in mind, he's Purdue's fourth scoring option. It's hard to be consistent when you're in that role. Not everyone's going to be Mason Gillis, where he gets a lot of open looks from three and cans them at a really high level. Teams are really trying to make Fletcher Lawyer run off that line right now. We'll see if Purdue can find a counter, get him going again. But that felt significant because that really made Purdue uncomfortable a little bit. It felt like, and this is just anecdotal here, it felt like Ohio State was getting the 50-50 balls really well, and that played a huge role. They extended some possessions just from getting to loose balls where Ohio State ends up scoring. Force a turnover or two just from being quicker to those loose balls. Ohio State only had 7 offensive rebounds, but it felt like more. And I don't have data to back this up. It's just an anecdotal feeling. But it felt like they extended possessions a lot more than 7 times. Jamison Battle hits a 3 on a scramble play. There were a few others where, Thornton gets a bucket or they get a putback around the rim. That's how it went today. And I'm not out here. I don't like saying this stuff because it comes across like I'm saying Purdue didn't play hard. And I don't think that's the case. I really don't. But things just went Ohio State's way. And they were a hungry team. Ohio State was clearly out there playing hard today. And that's something that led to their coach being fired earlier this week, that there wasn't enough of that in the program. It's where they're at here. It's where they're at. But they played really hard, and they fought for everything they had. I think when you combine all of this, the turnovers, Purdue only getting 9 3-pointers up, Ohio State seeming to get loose balls, it then exploits the fact that Purdue is not an elite defensive team. Purdue is a good defensive team for the most part. Purdue's better in team defense than like one-on-one defense, but it can be vulnerable to guys like Cam Christie and Bruce Thornton getting going on you. On Thursday, Ethan Morton did a wonderful job on Cam Christie in the second half. He changed that game by coming in and locking down Cam Christie. But, whether it was Lance Jones, who really struggled with Bruce Thornton, or Ethan Morton, who, had some time on Thornton and on Jamison Battle, Ohio State got stuff a little too easily. It's certainly the case when Zach Edey's not in the game. Purdue is not as good of a defensive team then. There is the fact with Zach Edey, you can attack and drop coverage. You can hit some of those pull-ups, and if you can get Edey isolated and have someone who can take him out on the perimeter in a switch, then you have a real advantage there. But Edey's a rim protector like no other in college basketball. He's incredibly effective there. And when he's not on the floor, you saw teams get to the rim way too easily. That's something that's really important to note about Purdue's defense because he is so effective at protecting the rim. It's not a great defensive team. It's not. I don't know that it's built to be. Just from some of the players on the team, I don't know that they're great one-on-one defenders, but Purdue's got to be a little better there too. Again, if you cut the turnovers out though, and some of those transition buckets, you're feeling a little better about your defense. All in all, this loss wasn't terribly hard to see coming. Purdue had that game at Rutgers where it didn't play super well. It has the game against Northwestern where, Northwestern goes ballistic, but defensively there, Purdue wasn't great. It plays well at Wisconsin. Indiana was fine. Minnesota was a bit of a scare, and then it finally caught up to you here against Ohio State. Again, I don't know that it's the end of the world. It is slightly concerning, Part of this could just be the ebbs and flows of the season because when you look back, Purdue's lost 2 games, and it bounced back from them really well. Purdue bounced back with a 19-point win over Iowa, and then wins over Alabama and Arizona after the loss to Northwestern. And then Purdue, a big win over Penn State, a dominant win at Indiana. Purdue was playing really well there for, the stretch after the Nebraska loss. So maybe Purdue's got that in it. Maybe that's what we're going to see here over these final 5 games of the regular season, is Purdue just really be fine. Because when Purdue doesn't turn the ball over, it is fine. It doesn't have these problems. It's the commonality here in every loss Purdue has. If it doesn't turn the ball over, it generally does enough. It has every other time. It tends to do enough between rebounding, between three-point shooting, getting to the free throw line, which, boy, Purdue had another incident where it did not shoot free throws particularly well, but that's neither here nor there against Minnesota. But just overall, it's got to watch these turnovers because it's not a good enough defensive team to overcome them, and you're putting way too much pressure on your offense to shoot like 60% to overcome all these turnovers. Wanted to get into the Q&A here before I look at the week ahead, because so many of the questions come from this Ohio State game as we break it down and kind of look back on it. But the first one was, the loss to Ohio State really a flashback to last year, or was it just a sloppy game with tough circumstances? He points to Purdue missing some easy shots around the rim, Ohio State having that little bump after their coach got fired, hitting jumpers really well. When you look at the thought that it's just like last year, because that's been one that I've seen a lot. I guess in what aspect? I mean, Purdue losing, sure, and where it falls on the calendar, okay. And the turnovers are, a bit of a commonality from last year to this and from 2 years ago. But I don't think this was like the Fairleigh Dickinson loss. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like that Fairleigh Dickinson loss, but I don't think so. Last year, Purdue couldn't make open threes. Now, teams are running Purdue off the three-point line because it makes so many threes. There's your big difference. Last year, teams wanted Purdue to shoot threes. Fletcher Lawyer was not shooting as well last year. Say what you want about him, but the dude's shooting 10% better from three this year. That's a massive difference. Braden Smith's been great from three. Mason Gillis has been better from three than he was last year. Lance Jones has been a nice addition there. Last year, Fletcher Lawyer wasn't shooting great. Smith wasn't getting many of them. Gillis wasn't shooting as many or as well. Ethan Morton and Brandon Newman were being left open a good amount. David Jenkins was okay. This is all different. This is very different. I don't know that I view it the same way at all. Sure, some of the, on defense, I guess it's a little different, or I guess maybe a little bit, but I don't know. I don't see this being the same as last year at all. I do think, too, Purdue just missed a lot of shots in the game against Ohio State. I mean, trying to do math on the fly is never a good idea here, but I mean, Purdue's well under 50% from 2-point range. That's pretty rare for Purdue, and that's just the case. So it happened, but I don't think it's like last year. And then the same listener asked, why are people freaking out over quote-unquote bad guard play when it was largely a bad shooting day? He points to the front court having 8 of the 14 turnovers, which is true. Look, with the backcourt, the guard play stuff, that's the narrative around Purdue over time. Whether it's accurate or not, I don't know. Like right now, Fletcher Lawyer's getting all the hate because he's this year's public opinion scapegoat for Purdue fans. It's always someone. Like last year, it was Ethan Morton, who was, drug all season until Brandon Newman, took over the spot in the starting lineup, and then didn't really change anything. The season still ended the way Purdue didn't want it to end. 2 years ago, it was Sasha Stefanovic. Well, that was kind of nonsense. The guy was almost 1,000-point scorer at Purdue. Hit threes at a really high level, but whatever. Someone always gets that title. And Fletcher Lawyer's had a few rough games in a row here. It's not always fair. It's reality. I don't think it's the end of the world. We're not that far removed from him hitting a dagger 3 to beat Northwestern, hitting some big-time shots against Wisconsin. He's going to be okay. I think in general, the backcourt is fine. Like, yeah, Ethan Morton has his deficiencies. I do think I would like him just to shoot the 3 when it's wide open for him. Purdue can get an offensive rebound off it too. If you really factor in the numbers, it's probably a better shot than just his shooting percentage indicates. But, let it fly. But Braden Smith is excellent. Braden Smith is, an All-American candidate, if you ask me. Certainly an All-Big Ten guy. Lance Jones didn't have his best game against Ohio State. Again, last few games he hasn't been great either, but he's been great this season. You've seen Fletcher Lawyer do it. I don't know. It's just the reaction that comes from a loss in a season where expectations are really high. This was kind of always on the table. And this is how it's been after the few losses. This is just on a Sunday afternoon. So people aren't going to bed right after the game the way they were for, I think both Purdue's losses before this were 9 o'clock games. A little different, a little more time for people to get upset. Purdue's going to be okay. The backcourt isn't, I don't think it's some huge issue right now. Any thoughts on a possible change to the starting lineup or just minutes in general? I've said on here before, I'm not a huge fan of just changing the lineup for the heck of it. I think Purdue's fine, at the 4 spot. Trey Kaufman-Wren's starting, Mason Gillis coming in off the bench. They each play about 20 minutes or so. I don't think there's some huge issue that needs addressed there, especially because Trey Kaufman-Wren's had a really nice stretch here. You take away some of the free throw struggles he's had, he's been really nice for Purdue. You kind of always have to take his stats for what they're worth because he's playing so much alongside Zach Edey. But, he has 12 points against, Ohio State. Really good right away from the start, too. He has 9 and 8 against Minnesota. He has 7 and 7 against Indiana. The game against Michigan, he had a nice game. He's doing pretty well. I don't think there's some huge need for changes there. I don't know who you would start over Fletcher Lawyer. I don't. Camden Heide and Miles Colvin don't seem ready for that type of action yet. At least it doesn't feel like it. Ethan Morton's playing a nice role right now. I don't know that you need to move Lawyer out of the starting lineup for him. I don't think there's really a huge problem that needs solved there right now. I think Purdue just needs to take care of the basketball better, and Purdue needs to just find ways to be better there, because when it doesn't turn the ball over, it's been great. Question was, on paper, Ohio State is more talented. They are bigger and more athletic. Traditionally, these teams cause us problems. I knew we would lose today. What can Painter do to fix this? I mean, he has to know this too, right? Okay. Are they more athletic or are they more talented? because those are two different things. We've seen players at Purdue who are good athletes that, don't have the talent in terms of what it takes to, be a really high-level player. Ohio State's more athletic, but if that's everything, they wouldn't have fired their coach and they wouldn't be 5-10 in Big Ten play. In terms of talent, I don't know. It depends how you define that. I mean, I'm not telling you you're wrong. I think talent's just kind of subjective. I think Purdue's a really talented team. I think Braden Smith's a really talented player. I think Zach Edey's a really talented player. I think Lance Jones is. I think there's a lot of talent on Purdue's roster. But, when it turns the ball over, it doesn't get to show off the talent. Ohio State is more athletic. And I think some of its length did give Purdue some trouble in the sense that it was able to run it off the three-point line better. It was able to force Zach Edey into some turnovers. But, I think that's... Is it something that's given Purdue some problems? Sure. But, you look at a team like Gonzaga that's known for being kind of long and, being very kind of athletic and kind of one-on-one ISO stuff that Purdue beat. You look at Marquette, who's a very free-flowing athletic style of team Purdue beat. Same with Arizona, same with Alabama. So, Purdue's beaten a lot of different styles of teams this year. It just didn't on Sunday. I don't know. It's tough. Thought on Fletcher Lawyer not shooting in the second half. I didn't realize this till this question was asked, that he didn't have a shot attempt. Now, he did get fouled on a shot, so it doesn't count in the books, but Purdue can't afford for him to lose confidence. That's got to be key for Purdue here, because you did see Purdue lose confidence last year, and that's going to be critical. It's only going to get more ratcheted up in terms of pressure, because the second, if you're, and this leads into my next question, but, if you're very NCAA tournament focused, the second you start getting that media attention on you, the pressure is just going to get ratcheted up and up and up, because all eyes are going to be on Purdue. It's one of the most talked about teams in the country right now, if not maybe the most talked about team, for some good reasons and some not so good reasons. But Fletcher Lawyer is just part of that puzzle. Purdue can't lose confidence here. As it sits a month from now, it'll know its first round opponent, and it'll be preparing for the first round of the NCAA tournament. In closing, kind of on that note, at what point is the national opinion of Purdue correct? How many times in a row can a team fade in February/March before it's undeniably a real problem and can't be explained away? I think if you're focused on the NCAA tournament results of this year, which a lot of folks are, rightfully so, but if that's the focus, you've got to let this thing play all the way out before coming to your conclusion. Because that's if that's the pinnacle, let's get there. Let's see what happens there. It's not always, the best predictor what's happening a month before. Like I saw on this day last year, UConn had just lost. It's like 7th game of the season or whatever, and then it wins the national title. The conversation from a lot of folks coming into this year was NCAA tournament success. Well, Purdue's putting itself in a good spot to be, in a good spot in the NCAA tournament from a seed and location-wise. But let's see what happens there before really finalizing this narrative. Because, remember, let's go back to 2019. Purdue lost at the barn late in the season. Did not play tremendously well at Northwestern in the game that clinched it a share of the Big Ten title. And then I guess it did kind of pull away late now that I'm looking back at that. I remember that being a close game for a while. But Purdue loses in the Big Ten tournament to a Minnesota team that was not tremendously good. And then it goes to the Elite Eight. I mean, I don't know. And just, on this question, guys, get upset about Matt Painter at your own risk. The grass is not always greener. The odds are not in your favor that whenever Matt Painter moves on from Purdue, that the next guy is going to be an upgrade. Because there's not a whole lot of room for that. So get upset all you want. I know it's a frustrating loss, but big picture here, Purdue's 23-3. It is probably going to stay number 2 in the country on Monday. Maybe not. I don't know. Probably should, but we'll see. Purdue's in a pretty good spot, and we'll see. We'll see what happens this week. Purdue's got Rutgers on Thursday night in Mackey. Rutgers has played pretty well since getting Jeremiah Williams on the team. He's been a big difference maker. But again, it's a team that's given Purdue some problems. You saw it in that first matchup. They did some things that gave Purdue some fits. But, sorry, I'm just looking up. That game did go final. Rutgers just lost by 11 at Minnesota. So, it's not just phenomenal or anything. Maybe this will be a chance for Purdue to regroup defensively against a poor Rutgers offense. If you take care of the ball, I feel really confidently that you're going to be fine against Rutgers. And then you go to Michigan Sunday at 2 p.m. That's another CBS game. Michigan's a mess. Things are not particularly well there. Michigan has... Oh, my goodness. Michigan has only won 2 games since December 16th. Wow, that's worse than I realized. 3-12 in Big Ten play. Yikes. Michigan was 6-5 and is now 8-18. So that means they're 2-13 in their last 15 games. Sheesh. Purdue will see Doug McDaniel, but I don't think it'll make too much of a difference. Purdue would have to really fall apart to lose to that Michigan team. But it's about bouncing back here and not making these struggles more than just what they've been. A little blip on the radar, because Purdue has still been excellent this season. Holistically, it has been very good. It just has to keep taking this one game at a time and bouncing back and stacking positive results on top of one another. You got 5 games left in the regular season. It's not code red. It's not panic mode. Purdue may lose the number 1 overall seed to UConn, but it's not that important. You just need the Midwest region and you're fine. Just keep breathing here, guys. I think it's going to be okay. I really do. I think Purdue's all right here, but the turnovers are the issue. And if Purdue can corral that, Purdue is going to be fine. And we have not seen Purdue lose a game this year where it took care of the basketball. And really, Purdue hadn't been that close to losing games where it took care of the basketball. That's what it is. It is not the most glamorous thing. It is not the biggest deep dive into the film. That number tells you what you need to know. So we'll see what Purdue does here. But I appreciate those of you who listened. Thank you guys for always supporting the show. I appreciate you all. I'll be back next week to talk about these 2 Purdue games. We'll see where the Boilermakers are at, because that'll mark the end of February, and a certain fateful month will be on the horizon when I record my next show, probably Sunday after Purdue, Michigan. So I'll talk to you then. Have a great week, guys, and take care.